Hello, my name is Aaron Falber. I'm the founder and owner of Rooster Lark, and today I'm going to show you how to get started with your first packaging for your product. Now, there's a lot of different options out there, a lot of different ways to get started. And as an example, I'm going to take you through how I did my packaging and how I got started. We're going to walk through each iteration of the bag and kind of the lessons I've learned, and you can use that as a template for how to get your first packaging designed to launch your product at the farmer's market or local stores or online or however you're going to do it. The first thing that I like to think about when you're first starting to get your packaging designed is this concept of the minimum viable product that's talked about a lot with new businesses and startups. And that's the concept that you want to spend as little money as possible testing and executing your idea to gain feedback and then fix it and tweak it to improve. So you want to have that in mind. And if you're going to follow the minimum viable product route and do the just enough to get your product in a package to sell, your first packaging is going to be really, really bad. And I think it's okay. I think you need to embrace that. I think you need to be excited to just get your product out there and start selling it. So let's take a look at my first packaging to see where we started and kind of how we grew from there. So I'm going to pull up the first bag. This is the first label and first bag that we started with at the farmers markets here in Denver. And I'm going to walk you through about the different elements. The first is we started with a stock bag. There's a ton of stock bag companies online. I use Pacific Bags. I'll link to them in the show notes. But you can Google search stock packaging, stock boxes, stock bags, and you will see literally tons of options in all sorts of colors, in plastics and papers, clear, solid. Really, there's so many options for stock packaging. And these black bags, that's how I bought them. I bought them by the case. They came in a case of about 500 bags at a time. And they just came flat, and I had my own labels printed, and I would stick them on myself manually. Now let's talk about this first label. For those of you who may be just stumbling upon this video, as you can see here, this is my product. We started at a farmer's market, and it's all the frozen vegetables for an omelet or scramble. They're chopped, seasoned, and flash frozen, so you just saute and add your own fresh eggs at home. And this was the first time I ever started selling it. I had a family friend who did a little bit of graphic design and designed the logo for me. I had another friend of mine, take some products. This are just amateur product photography shots that I took with some buddies. And I had, this designer kind of put the label together for me in a very inexpensive way. I also had them printed in a very, very small run. I only had 250 labels printed front and back for each SKU. So I didn't have to make a huge commitment up front, and I could launch at the farmer's market and get some feedback. So this was the first packaging. This is what we launched with. And within the first couple weeks, I immediately identified some problems with this bag and this packaging. And I want to walk you through them now. The first problem I identified is that when people pick up the bag to look at it, they were confused. They couldn't grasp the concept of what it was. And I had to explain it and really walk them through it. And the thing that always got them to see and understand is I would have a clear bag in my little cooler behind me. And I would pull out the clear bag to show them what it looked like in a clear plastic bag. And then instantly it would click for them. So I said, okay, I need to make the bag see-through so they can more quickly understand what's in it, because at first look, you can't even tell it's a frozen vegetable mix. The second thing I immediately noticed is that the Starburst, that's this little yellow thing right here, the Starburst, the call out on the package, had too much text. It didn't get the point across at all. Makes 4 to 5 omelets just to add eggs. It gets totally lost. So I knew I had to make the Starburst more focused and a little bit bigger. So those were the first things I realized. Thank God I only got small runs, right? I only had 250 of each label. I only had 500 of the bags, a couple cases at a time, and no big deal. I sell through and I start my next bag and I make a change. Could not have done that if I, had a big fancy bag right off the bat. And let's take a look at the bag I did next. This is what we moved into. And this is a picture of our bags. This is the first bag we got into Whole Foods with. And this is it on the shelf at Whole Foods in Colorado Springs. And I'm going to pull up a little bit bigger of a bag. So let's take a look at the changes. They're really clear here. First, we moved into the clear bag. Makes total sense. You can see the product. You can see the vegetables inside, and you understand that this is a frozen vegetable mix much more quickly. We also cut down the starburst and made the starburst bigger. So it says just add eggs a little more clearly. So again, we're still doing small runs. The label is still, by all accounts, this is a bad label, but we're still small and we're still learning. We just get into Whole Foods, and I continue to gather feedback from the customers, okay? So the first thing I notice is customers are in the aisle looking. I'm in the store demoing all the time, and they're walking down the aisle, they're looking at it, and it's still not catching their eye. They're walking right by it, or they're looking at it, and they're still not quite figuring it out what it is. The picture is kind of unclear. It's just a picture with vegetables. Yeah, there's a just add egg starburst, but people aren't quite getting it. And I see that because I'm in the store getting consumer feedback. I'm watching people walk down the frozen aisle and either stop and interact with it, or open the cooler, reach for a different product, and not even pause. So I'm identifying the problems with this bag. What do I think needs to be improved? I think it needs to be simplified. I think there's too much noise on the bag, and I think the whole point of the product to just add eggs is still totally getting lost. And I need to do a course correction. I need to scream from the rooftops that this is a Just Add Eggs product. This is what I've realized from being in the store. So what do? I have a huge overcorrection, and this is the bag that I end up with. This is the next bag that I make. I completely do away with the photo. I think it's totally confusing. It makes people think there's egg in the product, and I just say, just add eggs, and I scream it. I designed this label myself. No designer. I got rid of the designers. I kept the logo, and I just put just add eggs. Did this in Microsoft Word. Ingredients, frozen. Boom. Simple. Scream it, get the point across. And I will say, this bag was a significant improvement to the other bag. It started selling way better because people would at least understand quickly what it is. The next things that I start to notice, what's wrong with this bag? How can I keep tweaking it? I realize that there's no way to differentiate between the two SKUs. Right here you can see we have seasoned Rocky Mountain, seasoned Southwest, different vegetables in each. The logos have different vegetables, but that's really subtle. You really need to be paying attention to notice that. So I realized I need to find a way to differentiate between the SKUs. And I also think that Just Add Eggs could look a little bit better. I want to make a font change. So what do I end up with? Boom, right here. We throw the colors on there. We also launched our third SKU, but we throw the colors on there to differentiate between the SKUs on the shelf so people can more easily understand. I don't even get a new logo designed. You can see I just roll with the same vegetables because people don't even really notice the difference. And this bag really is what I expanded in Colorado and in the region with. And all those iterations I went through and changed the bag, every couple hundred units, maybe every 1,000 units, I changed the label and improved upon it. And that is the essence of the minimum viable product, is you have to, I didn't spend a lot of money. And yes, my per unit costs were higher. These stock bags were around 50 cents a piece, plus the cost of the label. And as we know, we can get huge savings if you get a custom printed bag, but you lose the ability to be nimble. And I needed to have that ability and use the stock bags with the hand stuck label, so I have the ability to be nimble and change it up and take the consumer feedback and constantly change the label in order to come to a more perfect packaging, to find out what works, what's resonating with the consumer. Okay, I get to this packaging. This is still, as I said, the stock bags, and I start to pitch this to buyers on a larger scale. I'm trying to pitch buyers at the chain level to get 40, 50, 120 stores at a time and all over the country. And they tell me that I need a more professional bag. This bag looks too amateur, too mom and pop. And you know what? They're right. It does look amateur. It is amateur. I designed it myself in Microsoft Word. I'm not a designer. There's no design elements to it. So I totally hear them loud and clear. Oh, I forgot to pull up this picture. Here's a picture of the bag and the end cap. And as you can see, it looks great, but it's not professional looking. It definitely looks like a mom and pop brand. And it's just not ready for national expansion, you can tell. So I start thinking about, what do I want to do for a custom bag? And I decide that it's the time to switch and get custom graphics done. And I think about, what are the most important things that I've heard from the customer that I want to be on the bag? The first thing is the window. I think it's important to have a window so consumers can see the product. The next thing is that just to add eggs, this was huge for me. Putting this on the bag was a total game changer for my sales. And I knew that the just add eggs still had to be a big feature of the bag. The third thing I told the designer is, how do I want the feel to be? Because there's no design elements right now. And you could really take it any direction. You could go sleek, modern, really artsy, drawings, fun. And the big word that stuck out to me was fun. And when I would demo this product in the stores, consumers would tell me, once they got it, once they understand, oh, you just add the eggs, you pour the vegetables in, they'd go, oh, fun. And that always stuck with me, especially the kids who always thought it was fun. It's kind of like cooking for them, but not cooking. And I told the designer, I really want the package to be fun. I want it to have just add eggs, and I want it to have a window. So here is where I landed. This was the first custom packaging that I did. Now, I had a whole separate tutorial on how to get your custom packaging printed. I'll also link to that in the show. We're not going to talk about that here, the mechanics of getting this bag made up, but I am going to talk about the cost, what went into the design, and how I think I could improve upon this bag still, kind of what's working and what's not. The first thing that I think is really working is the graphics, and I think they really landed what I said about fun. We also did a name change, as you'll notice. We switched to Rooster and Lark instead of Farm to Skillet. That's the other thing with the name, just to quickly go back. Another thing with the customer feedback is that I noticed the name Farm to Skillet wasn't working because people were always confusing it with Farm to Table, Farm to Fork. They would never say the name right. They can never remember the brand name, and they'd always mess it up with other Farm to this, Farm to that. And that was another thing I was able to change because I hadn't committed to packaging too early where I had thousands and thousands of units. But back to this bag, staying on track here. What's working? Fun. The characters, they nailed it. I love the graphics. I think it totally gets the vibe of the brand that I'm going for. It appeals to families, adults, but it's also kid-friendly, and kids can get into it a little bit. Not that we're marketing to kids, but it is a family-friendly product. It's for parents who are busy. It's for, young people who are working, don't have time to chop their vegetables. They nailed it on the head. I think that the just add eggs is good. It's prominent. And down here, I'll pull up the back of the bag. This is where we landed on the back. We have the window so customers can see it. The minimums for this bag right here, we got it printed overseas, and the minimums were 10,000 units per bag, per SKU, which is a huge minimum. And I think about, if I had done that off the bat, if I had said, okay, I have this idea, I'm going to launch it at the farmer's market, but I need really good packaging to make it successful, I would have gone and done this right away, but it would have looked something like this. It would have looked terrible. And the point that I'm making is, to get to the really good packaging, you need to go through the motions of doing the minimum viable product and doing test packaging, taking the time to stick the sticker on the bag, even though it costs more, sell it in smaller quantities and get the feedback. And all those changes, all these 4 or 5 iterations of the bag, I would have never been able to do had I committed to something like this too early. It just would have been too many bags and too much of a commitment. So now that I'm in this bag, I mentioned these bags, the stock bags, are probably between 50 and 55 cents when you factor in the cost of the label and shipping, all that. These bags are 10.5 cents. They're, I think, 12 cents when you factor in all the shipping and the taxes and importing and all that. That is so much cheaper compared to the other bag. So there is, of course, a benefit to going to custom packaging. However, there's a step I didn't take that is now available to you in between this bag and this bag, and that's digital printing. So you can get a bag like this. These bags all require plate fees, where I had to pay for a plate to be etched, and they run a film through it, and that's why it's so cheap. But there are digital printers now, and I'll link to those again in the show notes, where you can go get, it's still bigger quantities, but you could get 10,000 units split up across all 3 or all 5 of your SKUs. So it's much more manageable. And even then, the cost per unit will still be maybe between 40 and 50 to 60 cents per bag, depending on your quantity. But it's still, you're in a custom bag for much less, and you didn't commit to so many. Now, I still wouldn't go straight to digital printing because you're still committing to at least 10,000 units, and you haven't gone through these motions. You don't know what's works. And if you print 10,000 units of this bag, God help you. You know, you're selling through this, or you're eating the cost of all the unsold inventory as you go to a new bag. So you still shouldn't go to digital too early because the quantities are still high. But I would recommend going to digital before you go here to here, so you can test the different elements of the bag and see what needs to be changed. A few things, since we're critiquing the packaging, I wanted to critique this bag and give you my thoughts on how I can improve this bag and what I'm going to do for the next iteration of the bag when I decide to redesign it. Or I should say rebrand, do a moderate rebrand. The first thing that I think is missing from this bag is I think the Just Add Eggs here is still not big enough. I think it was so prominent on the other bag, and it was so crucial to building my initial customer base that even though I really emphasized with the designers that I wanted Just Add Eggs to be really big, I think through all the iterations in the bag design, it ended up being shrunk too small in favor of more graphics. And I think we need to balance it out where Just Add Eggs might even be more prominent than Rocky Mountain Skillet. When you look at the information hierarchy, what's more important, Rocky Mountain Skillet or Just Add Eggs? I might argue that Just Add Eggs is, Rocky Mountain Skillet should be secondary, Just Add Eggs should be first in the information hierarchy. And I think even adding something down here and more, or other things, because a big part of my branding, or a big part of my whole pitch, especially on my YouTube channels and my LinkedIn channels, is that there's so many other things you can do with it. And I do regret maybe finding a way to incorporate that a little bit more. To come back to that, I did incorporate back here, the pasta, stuffed peppers, mac and cheese, and more. But this isn't even secondary. This is so far at the bottom of the information hierarchy. After all the information on the front, all the instructions on the back, that's totally lost. The second thing I would do to improve this bag is I would move the window to the front of the bag. I think over here, that was, again, so crucial to having to my sales and getting people to see, because the vegetable mix looks good. There's avocados and butternut squash and red peppers. It's pretty. That's missing here. You got to pick up the bag and turn it around to see the product. And when I was designing the bag, I thought, when I look at all the other products in the store, the window is on the back of their bag. But that doesn't mean the window needs to be on the back of my bag. And I'm starting to see more packaging with the window on the front. And that's something I wish I had done. That's something I could improve. And when I improve this packaging and I do get a rebrand, I am absolutely going to put the window on the front and incorporate it in some way so the consumers can see what's going on. The next improvement I would make on the back is more emphasis on the pasta, stuffed peppers, mac and cheese, and more, because people don't understand as quickly that there's so many other things you can do with it. And that kind of plays into the fact that I don't think this copy here is doing anything for me. I think the brand story is great, but it's not really coming across in an authentic way here. And since this is kind of a unique product, I need to use every inch of space that I have in order to communicate important information to the customer. And I would argue putting a recipe here, a recipe for mac and cheese, or even co-branding it with another product, like if I did a recipe for Rooster Lark Annie's mac and cheese or something here, I think that would go so much further and be so much more valuable to the consumer, and I'd have so much more space because the window would be on the front. That would be a huge improvement. And those are kind of the 3 major changes that I would make to the bag. And I think if I had known about the digital printing, and I don't know, maybe I didn't know about it, or maybe they just hadn't really expanded, or maybe the tech wasn't there. I think the digital printers that do these bags are pretty new technology. For whatever reason, I didn't go the digital route because I didn't know about it. And I kind of wish I had done that, because if I had the digital route, I wouldn't have invested in the cylinders, and I could have made these changes that I'm talking about without totally redesigning the bag. That does bring me to something to mention when you consider changing up your bag, is the cost of design fees. You cannot discount the cost of design because design is very expensive, especially if you're an indecisive designer, meaning you're going to hire a designer, they come back to you with designs, and you're constantly changing your mind. I think that these digital bags or these plate bags, these big run bags, make that really hard because you don't have the flexibility, and every time you want to change it, the better your graphics get, the more expensive it is to make adjustments and change it up. So you want to take that into mind, and I think here, those are small adjustments now that I think would be worth investing in had I not already bought the plates. And kind of committed to this 10 cents a unit thing. But if I had gotten these bags printed digitally and I had known the things I know now, I would have made those changes before investing in the plate fees. And I think it just, again, shows the importance of going slowly, using the rudimentary packaging to work out what's working and what isn't. And I promise you, you don't need top-of-the-line packaging to sell your product. There are so many people in this country, especially if you're doing e-commerce and you have access to the internet, you can find people to buy it in your rudimentary packaging before investing in this. And my biggest advice is to take your time, go slow, and go through the motions. Learn what's working, learn what isn't. Be patient and really listen to your consumer. If you rush ahead, you think you know what your best packaging is, but I promise you, you don't. Your consumer knows, the market knows, but you don't know. And you have to take the time to get that feedback before you invest in this. And that is how you will arrive at the right bag when it's time to invest in plates and it's time to invest in cylinders and getting the big runs of custom packaging. So that is kind of my thoughts on how to get started with your own custom packaging. And again, if you're selling at a farmer's market, you're selling at e-commerce, you're selling it at small stores, it really doesn't matter what the product is. If you're selling a packaged product, a CPG product, I really firmly believe that you should take the time to start small, do the rudimentary packaging, and go through. Don't spend too much money on design up front when you don't know what's going to work and what isn't going to work. And just be ready to accept feedback. Keep it nimble, keep it lean, and go the sticker route for a long time to understand your customer. Again, the final thing before you commit to the big packaging run, do the digital bags, even though they're more expensive. These bags, were in the 50 cent range. These bags digital were in the 50 to 70 cent range, and then when you get here to custom printed overseas, you're in the 10 to 15 cent range. So take the time to do it right. Don't make so many mistakes. Be nimble. It'll be better in the long run. And I hope this was helpful. So as you're going to launch your products, remember these principles. Remember my advice. Consider going this route. And best of luck to you on you and launching your product. Any questions? Any comments? Please drop me a comment in the comments section on the video. And if you like these tutorials, you like Rooster Lark, don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the bell in the corner so you know when I'm releasing new videos. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.